Hey everyone, I wanted to talk to you in this video about a stock that I never thought would be an exciting stock to talk about, and that is Kodak. So when I think about Kodak, if I was thinking about it at all, I would think about it as a film company. I would also think about it as a company that was relevant, decades ago and not currently. But what's really interesting is that this stock actually, in late July, surged by 2,900%, which is insane. I mean, especially you put that in perspective a few different ways. If you're able to, as an investor, earn 12% a year, you're doing pretty good, okay? In fact, that's a pretty great return. Now, you can also kind of think about this in terms of, in terms of dollars. You think about, well, what if you invested $10,000 and you got a 2,900% return? Okay, well, $10,000, first of all, you're starting out with that. That's an amount that's going to help you get a decent used car. But if you would have invested $10,000 in Kodak stock in late July, and 2 days later sold it at the highest amount that you could have sold it at, I mean, pretty unrealistic in practice, but just again, putting this in perspective, that $10,000 would have turned into $300,000. So you literally, in a matter of 2 days with this stock, would have went from, shopping around the used car lot to shopping around for a pretty nice home, okay, that you're going to pay cash for. I mean, that's a pretty big difference in your financial situation. And that by no means is an endorsement to say that, you should go, looking for companies that are going to be home runs like this, but it's still kind of interesting to put that in perspective. So what happened? What allowed this stock to go from that $2 to the $60 and the intraday high that at the end of July that resulted in that huge surge of that 2,900%? Well, it started out with the Trump trade advisor, Peter Navarro. And Peter Navarro, he had, this agenda in mind for generic drugs where he said, I think that we rely too heavily on foreign countries to supply our pharmaceuticals. And he said, I want to find a way to have U.S.-based companies producing those drugs here, so there's less potential issues, less issues with potential supply chain disruptions, or any other things of that nature from dealing with foreign entities. So we made a list of companies and said, hey, who could we potentially work with? Who could we potentially funnel some government funds to help out with this initiative? And oddly enough, Kodak actually made the list. Why didn't they make the list? Well, Kodak actually has a pharmaceutical subsidiary in addition to their film business. So basically the thought was, if they have their pharmaceutical subsidiary, they're already kind of doing work like this, could they potentially be leveraged or partnered with to be able to make that happen? So the deal was put together, or the proposal was kind of on the fast track to have over $700 million. It was actually going to be for $765 million that the government was going to loan to Kodak to be able to help push Peter Navarro and the Trump administration's agenda to help get U.S.-based drug manufacturing ramped up. So when that news broke, that's what set the stock surging. Again, sent the stock going from $2 up to $60, huge spike. Now, what's interesting is that when it comes to insiders basically, selling and profiting personally from big stock moves like that, it gets pretty hairy. The SEC doesn't, take kindly to insider trading. But what's really interesting is that there's a director for the Kodak company named George Carfunkel that owned actually 6 million shares of Kodak stock, and he decided to gift on the day that Kodak surged to its highest it's been in years. On that day, he decided to gift to a religious entity, or this nonprofit religious group that he created 2 years prior. He decided to gift them 3 million shares. And the accounting worked out for the share price where that was going to be a gift of $116 million. Now, that gift of $116 million is actually the largest on record that any individual has made to a religious institution. Now, that's a huge number, and that's very generous, but what's also interesting is that there are no laws against insider gifting as opposed to insider trading. So in other words, if you make a lot of money and you know that share price is going to be only increased for a short amount of time, you still have the ability to capitalize on that by gifting that in such a way where it's actually tax deductible for yourself. Because in his particular case, and again, I mean, like, obviously, you know, the math has to be worked out with the CPA. I don't know his individual tax situation, but the way it works out, he potentially stands to gain tens of millions of dollars in tax breaks from that gift of $116 million. So what that basically means is, you know, with that big surge in the stock price, he was able to still profit by millions of dollars in tax savings while also gifting a huge amount of money to a religious group that he set up 2 years prior. So a generous donation, saving tens of millions of dollars of tax liabilities for yourself. I feel like that's a pretty good situation for him to be able to work out. And I thought that was a unique thing. I hadn't heard of that before, and I wasn't previously aware that insider gifting, as opposed to insider trading, was actually completely illegal to do. So we talked about the surge in the stock price. So again, it went from that $2 up to that 60-day intraday high at the end of July. But what happened afterwards? Well, the stock continued to kind of go down in price, and it ended up going as low as about $5 and change. Again, all the way from 60. Now, it's a pretty significant haircut, and if you would have held on to it, having that invested at $10,000, you still wouldn't be in a position where you're able to pay cash for a house, at least a non-foreclosure, after the stock price had settled back to $5 and change. But what's also kind of interesting is I'm getting the sense that the story here is not entirely over, because, by the way, it kind of came out that after they had that $765 million government loan on the table, you know, because of the way it was handled and because, you know, there was some issues about stock options that were granted and just the way the deal was kind of came together and was publicized and shared, the SEC got involved. And when the SEC got involved, the government decided to have that loan put on hold and the grant put on hold. So not being said that it was completely canceled indefinitely, but it didn't actually go through. It's pending an investigation. And that being said, even with all of that going on, with the stock price then falling all the way back to $5 and change, there was a hedge fund that purchased 3.9 million shares of Kodak stock on August 31st. And that news of that purchase, which, by the way, then that represents that this hedge fund now owns 5.2% of the Kodak stock. What that did was it kind of basically sent the market, sending this stock a lot higher once again. So the stock just today, on September 1st, actually closed over 20% higher, and it closed at over $7 a share on this news that D.E. Shaw was starting to accumulate shares, or had purchased that 3.9 million shares that they did. So that's interesting to me. The fact that you have this hedge fund deciding to commit that much to this company, knowing that government loan is on hold. But to me, that just kind of says that I think that this story isn't completely over. I think that there's the potential that this stock could actually kind of start to take off a little bit. I think from that perspective, you know, I'm actually interested in both sides of investing. I enjoy fundamental investing. I enjoy kind of playing around with some technical analysis and trying to figure out some different price movements. You know, that being said, the majority of my money is in stocks that I want to hold for the long term, that have nothing to do with any kind of like technical moves, or just stocks I want to continue to buy and add to every single week as I'm able to. But I still enjoy, I've got a kind of side account that I'll trade around a little bit. And, you know, with the price action that's going on in Kodak right now, it's on my watch list to say there are some levels that could be breached that would get my interest in thinking that, you know, there could be a way to profit from this in the short run. That being said, that's my own perspective. That's my own analysis. You have to do your own analysis and not just listen to a random guy on YouTube to be able to make those financial decisions. But just wanted to kind of throw that out there, that for me, I think that this has just been a really crazy story. A crazy story of, a $700 million loan that, sent the stock soaring, the falling through of that loan, or that being on hold, sending the stock crashing back down. You have this, hedge fund coming in and putting, that much capital to work in Kodak with that on hold. So I just thought this was a pretty interesting story. I wanted to kind of recap that on that. And if there's any kind of future breaking news about this, or if the stock ends up kind of fizzling out and goes back right down to $2 to trade, or decides to surge up in price, whatever ends up happening with this, I'd love to be able to kind of put together another video, check in, and just, discuss what ultimately happens. That being said, if you have any questions, comments, you want to see another video like this on another company, go ahead and let me know in the comments below. But it's been fun doing the research.